a dedicated family man.
He was the best grandpa I could ever ask for my kids.
He loved his family. He was always there for everyone.
And a pillar of the community.
He helped a lot of the people who were down on their luck.
He was changing everyone's life.
Is senselessly murdered.
We noticed what looked like burn marks.
Is this a torture type crime? Was he actually tortured?
Detectives follow a trail of evidence.
I noticed my dad's truck was gone.
We knew that this truck was a key to solving this homicide.
That reveals devastating betrayals.
Marty would employ people from drug rehab centers.
You look at him and you're thinking that if anybody could do it, this guy could do it.
Then a surprise lead reveals a killer no one imagined.
I've told you guys everything I know.
No, you haven't. We're pretty excited. We're just about to go nuts. It was a moment, I'll say that.
I never thought he would do something like that.
He's not the guy I would have picked to have committed this crime.
I was in complete shock.
Ardmore, Oklahoma is an honest, hardworking town built on family values.
We're a town of about 25,000 people, and it's a wonderful community.
It's a great place to live because you can have that large town feel and then yet come home to the small town atmosphere as well.
On the evening of November 15th, 2019, that small town feeling is shattered when police respond to a 911 call.
I had just sat down to eat when the phone rang, and it was dispatch advising me that officers were out on a possible homicide.
Police are checking in on a local man who hasn't been seen or heard from in several days.
They arrived, immediately looked in the window, could see the victim was laying face down in the floor, and they could see blood, so they forced their way into the residence. They knew immediately that he was deceased.
Minutes later, homicide detectives arrive at the scene.
The living room was just in disarray. There was items kicked over. There was blood on the couch. There was blood spatter on nearby items in the living room, the TV and pictures. And so we knew that there was a struggle that had taken place in that room.
When the detectives look at the body, they recognize the dead man.
I knew the victim. It was Marty Lucas. Most of the police officers knew who Marty was. Marty helped in the community. He helped a lot of the people who were down on their luck. Marty was a nice guy.
Detectives have to determine why 63-year-old Marty Lucas would be the target of such a heinous crime.
With the amount of trauma that Marty had suffered, it was a pretty violent, bloody scene.
You can see a lot of blood that has pooled around the body. You can see blood on the back of the body, on the head, and we knew that this was a death as a result of a beating or a blunt force trauma.
It's obvious that there was quite a struggle. Marty had hair in his hands. He had abrasions on his hands. I think he fought for his life. We noticed that there were pieces of what appeared to be a rock that had some moss on them. We found parts of it over by the couch where there was a large blood stain, and then parts of it over by him. We walked the exterior of the residence trying to find where maybe a rock would have come from. Immediately under the carport, there is a rock pathway. The walkway was missing a rock. So immediately we thought, well, whoever it was that did this took a rock from there and brought it with him. That indicated to us that this was premeditated.
And so we believe that he or she had used it as a weapon against Marty, and in the process of that, it was broken. We didn't find very large pieces of it, and so we believe that the majority of that rock was taken from the scene.
Police discover unusual markings on the body.
We noticed what looked like burn marks on his shirt, like his shirt had been ironed. My initial reaction was not only has he been hit by an iron, he's been burned by an iron.
Is this a torture type crime? Was he actually tortured? And so we believe maybe early on that the iron could have been the murder weapon, or at least an additional murder weapon in this case.
But what could have been the motive for such a violent attack?
Where his wallet would have been, someone had reached in and taken his wallet, because you could see the blood transfer, a handprint, like sliding down into his pants almost.
We were pretty clear that this was a crime involving a robbery and theft. His wallet was missing along with his phones.
Detectives make one more important observation.
We thought whoever had killed Marty knew him because there wasn't a sign of forced entry.
As investigators work, Marty's son Michael arrives at the scene.
I went to his house. It was a nightmare. It's the worst day of my life. I was in shock once I seen what was actually inside.
My husband called me. He said, my dad's dead. Someone killed him. And he was just screaming in my ear. He's like, I can't believe someone would kill my dad. I was in complete shock. He was such a nice person. Who would want to hurt him?
Marty Lucas was born into a military family in 1956. After graduating high school, Marty got married and had 2 children, Jennifer and Michael.
Michael and his dad were very, very close.
He loved his family. He was always there for everyone, you know. He made sure to make time for everyone. I used to call him Papa Smurf because he's just really funny, he's short. He's just a real, you know, bubbly person. My parents, they divorced when I was pretty young.
Marty had struggles when my husband was a child and a teenager.
He had a substance abuse problem.
He had been in and out of trouble with the police, petty crimes that was a result of that addiction.
In 2007, Marty got a second chance when he was offered a job as a carpenter and found renewed purpose in life.
From then on, he straightened up and started his own business. Did really well.
He turned his life around. He was one of the few success stories that I'm aware of in my career.
Marty threw everything into rebuilding his life and his family.
He taught me a lot of work-related skills at an early age. He let me start working with him when I was 12 years old. And my son, he's 8. He's already starting working him, basically, showing him skills like he did me when I was young.
He was the best grandpa I could ever ask for my kids.
Marty never forgot the second chance he'd been given and vowed to pay it forward.
Marty would usually go to the halfway houses and get people that had just got out of jail or that have a hard time with their life and see if they would want to work for him.
Basically, just giving workers second chances. He knew where they was coming from. He's been in their shoes.
He taught these men and women new skills. He treated them with the utmost respect.
Now investigators are left asking, who would want to bludgeon this well-respected contractor and caring grandfather to death?
He really had no enemies, and just to see that the way that he died was so brutal, it was very difficult to know that someone would be capable of doing something like that.
As detectives finish up at the crime scene, they turn to Marty's son, who gives them a crucial lead.
When I showed up, I noticed that my dad's truck was gone. That really threw me off because he wouldn't even let me drive his truck. He wouldn't loan the truck out to no one.
It was a Chevy pickup that originally had belonged to Marty's father. That truck was everything to him.
Detectives put out a bolo, or be on the lookout for the missing truck.
We needed to find the truck and maybe hope that either the suspect was still driving it or that they left behind evidence that we could identify him.
We knew that this truck was a key to solving this homicide.
Investigators ask Marty's loved ones who they think would have seen him last.
We found out that Marty had been missing 2 or 3 days prior to the Friday the 15th that we found his body. And one of the things we were told by family and friends is that Marty goes to this Valero gas station every morning to get coffee.
The Valero had video that pointed down the street that the crime occurred on.
The managers said that Marty had arrived last at that store on Tuesday morning.
Detectives search the security footage. On the day after Marty was last seen alive, and 3 days before his body was found, the truck appears.
Marty's truck was very unique, dark green color with custom wheels. This green truck was in a big hurry and it pulled out in front of a semi-truck and it was almost in an accident that we had captured on video.
Investigators need to track down Marty's truck and whoever is behind the wheel.
We thought if we find the truck, we're probably going to find our suspect. This is going to be our guy.
Coming up, detectives uncover suspects with dark pasts.
They said, he's violent. I thought, good Lord, he gets violent. I don't know what I'm going to do.
She had frequented a lot of the local casinos.
She knew he had large sums of cash.
This was the break that we needed.
And the trail leads to an unlikely killer.
You're not going to think that this is someone who could kill somebody. That kind of broke open a whole new layer of the case.
The investigation took off at warp speed because we think we've got our guy.
Police investigating the murder of 63-year-old contractor Marty Lucas have obtained gas station surveillance video of someone driving his truck the day after he was last seen.
We collected hours and hours of video from the store. We were able to piece together some events that happened before and after the homicide.
The footage shows a busy street a few blocks from Marty's house. When detectives scour the rest of the security tapes, something grabs their attention.
On Wednesday morning, just after daylight, you can see a gentleman walking from the direction of Motel 6, and that person was walking towards Marty's home.
Is this unidentified man involved in Marty's murder?
You can see the suspect. Then an hour later, you can see on the video that there's one guy in the truck, that there's a single person in the truck.
And so we thought he might be the same person that was in that video. Marty did not allow just anyone to drive this truck. In fact, he did not allow anyone to drive this truck. We had to follow the stolen truck. That was really going to be our key to solving this case.
While officers continue their search for the truck, detectives return to speak to Marty's family and friends.
That's one of the things we were trying to just nail down is, who has Marty been hanging out with lately? Who has he been working with? Who has he had problems with, if anyone?
Police learn that along with helping people back up on their feet, Marty often forged friendships with those he employed.
Marty would become close with some of the men that he worked with or that he would hire and try to get to know them.
There's probably about 6 or 7 of them I actually got pretty close to. He built up friendships with them.
Amanda and Jason, Marty's neighbors, were very close to him. Amanda used to work for Marty because she paints very well.
He didn't look down on me for, I was trying to get my life back on track. And he told me he did it, so you can do it.
Marty would bring a lot of these folks to family dinners or get-togethers. He tried to bring them into his family.
But now, police want to know, had Marty's generosity and business exposed him to danger?
He paid all of his people in cash. And that's just the way it is in the day laborers with those guys. They need money that day, so they're going to work. And everything's cash.
To know that he could pay them daily with cash and help them out may have led to his demise.
Police also discover not all Marty's employees felt like part of the family.
It wasn't an easy road for Marty because sometimes he would have to tell them that they couldn't work for him anymore because they would steal from him.
Anytime you're working with people who have drug and alcohol problems, it's not uncommon for them to steal from their employers. And Marty had faced some of that. He wasn't afraid to stand up to these people. He would tell them, if you mess up, you're gone.
So our list of suspects was a mile long. We were given several names, but yeah, it was so difficult for investigators because it was going to be hard to track them down. Where they were staying, they usually don't keep jobs very long.
As detectives begin tracking down Marty's current and former employees, they ask his neighbor if anyone had a grudge against him.
Well, I initially went to interview Amanda, and she said, over the last month or so, there's been some rough-looking characters over there.
1 month before his death, he had been hanging out with these new people, and they were helping him work on his truck and then had to redo the job.
She thought maybe there had been some anger issues between the victim and those guys.
The day they were there working, Marty seemed to be pacing back and forth like they were taking too long, and he didn't want to, leave them at his house. They were making too big of a mess. He was upset about that.
Amanda didn't know the men, but had overheard Marty talk to the man in charge.
One was a guy named Junior, and so this was someone that we wanted to speak with.
There's just one problem.
We did not know who Junior was.
We knew this to be probably a nickname, and that's all we really knew.
While detectives plan to search for Junior, Amanda also provides them with the name of another one of Marty's former employees.
Marty met Chris Dyer at a Valero, the local convenience store that he went to nearly every morning to get a cup of coffee. Chris had recently been fired from that store, had a falling out with the owner, and Marty had employed him.
I know Chris Dyer had worked for Marty, had been fired from there for drug use.
He'd had a criminal past. He'd been arrested and had an addiction problem with drugs and alcohol.
Officers speak with the owner of the Valero station where Chris once worked.
The owner-manager of the Valero store reaffirmed that Chris was just not a very good guy, that he had had trouble employing him, and so he felt like that he needed to let Chris go because there was always drama, that Chris was basically just at rock bottom and desperate for money. Chris Dyer knew that Marty carried several $100s. When he paid him for a job, he would pay him at the end of the day, and he would pay him with cash.
Was Chris Dyer desperate enough to bludgeon Marty Lucas to death?
We were thinking that maybe it was a robbery gone bad, knowing that Marty had this money in his home because he was down on his luck and needed money for drugs. And so there was a lot of questions concerning Chris Dyer. One of our main priorities early on in the investigation is to find this subject named Junior, along with Chris Dyer. And so we wanted to talk to these people.
So we need to locate Junior, and we needed to talk to Kristen as quickly as possible.
Police investigating the murder of contractor Marty Lucas are chasing multiple leads as they search for his killer and stolen truck. They've set their sights on two of Marty's employees, an unidentified man called Junior and a recently fired laborer named Chris Dyer.
A lot of these folks who are going through tough times, there is nothing permanent in their lives. There is nothing fixed in their lives. There is no stability. And so it was hard to track them down.
Following a lead, police questioned employees at the gas station where Chris had worked.
I spoke with the clerk that was on duty at the Valero, and she was able to give me a phone number to Gina Dyer. Gina is Chris's estranged wife.
She and Chris had been separated about a month because she had caught him cheating. He had gone back to drug use, and that he was currently living at the Econo Lodge Hotel.
Detectives find Chris at the hotel and bring him in for an interview.
We really thought that we had something. We knew that Chris had easy access to Marty's home. Chris Dyer knew that Marty carried up to $500 to $600 in cash on him at any given point in time.
So there's a rumor that some rumors went around that maybe you and him had gotten crossways and he had basically fired you. So you never had a disagreement?
No, not at all. Nope. And I'd like to know who in the hell's saying that, because that's bullshit. Pardon my French.
Police know better than to trust Chris's word.
We knew that Chris Dyer is down on his luck and had run-ins with the law, and well, maybe this is our killer. This is who it is. And then you get him in an interview room and he's cooperative and he's genuine. In fact, he was very distraught over Marty's death.
I hope you catch who the hell did it and fry their ass.
Yeah, I know, right? But
he was, man, that guy would do anything for anybody. I had some empathy there because he'd been in trouble before too. But damn sure didn't deserve to go out like that.
I think he considered Marty a friend, even though Marty had fired him.
Would you be willing for us to go through your truck, look through your hotel room, to see if there's anything that would be...
Yeah, I got
that we can roll you out?
Marty had what we would consider defensive wounds to the hands. There was hair and blood under the fingernails of the body. And so we knew that there was some type of altercation. We knew that there had to be injuries on our suspect or suspects. And Chris had none of that. He had no recent cuts or bruises.
In order to officially rule Chris out as a suspect, detectives check Chris's alibi.
He said he had gone to Kingston, Oklahoma, which is nearby, with Krista, his girlfriend. I believe it was the Wednesday before.
Police bring Krista in for an interview.
Is it possible that he slipped out of the room one night while you were sleeping, left, went and did something?
No, I'd have to say that just could not be possible.
His girlfriend also corroborated Chris's timeline as to what his story was. He had an alibi for that timeline, but he just didn't appear to be involved.
With nothing to link Chris to the murder, police are forced to let him go. Investigators hope Marty's preliminary autopsy report will provide more leads.
The significant thing for us from the autopsy was the fact the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, including the large gash to his head. Obviously, he was hit with something other than the rock because of the laceration on his head and because of the burn marks.
These burns that was on his back and part of his right arm came back as a post-mortem burns, which was very interesting to us, which means that they were caused after Marty had passed away. Initially, we were looking at these burns to the body as being type of a torture. Now, we believe the iron was used as a secondary weapon after. So the suspect didn't realize that. In his rage, he didn't know that Marty had already died, and he continued to hit him with this iron.
The preliminary autopsy report doesn't conclude whether the rock or iron ultimately killed Marty, and an exact time of death remains undetermined. Meanwhile, with the killer still at large, the worry takes a toll on Marty's family.
His son, Michael's always a quiet person, but he was like a walking zombie.
I couldn't sleep at night. I'd stay up during the day. It's fear for my family. Just because, like, I had no clue who would do this to my dad.
Michael was really panicked. Marty had so many different men working with him. I was very fearful of my life.
As police continue their search for other suspects, including the former employee Junior who worked on Marty's truck, a lead comes in about someone close to Marty who might have had a motive.
One of Marty's friends had called one of our patrol officers and told him that Marty was dating a lady named Donna Hargrave.
So Donna Hargrave is somebody that probably everybody at the Ardmore Police Department is familiar with and knows on site.
We knew Donna had a drug problem as well. She did have a few run-ins with police and frequented a lot of the local casinos.
Could Donna's vices have pushed her to murder Marty?
She knew Marty and knew that he had large sums of cash, and because she is a known drug user, that perhaps she had enlisted the assistance of another known drug user to go rob Marty. That was a scenario, obviously had some possibility to it. That's why we needed to talk to Donna as quickly as possible.
Officers bring Donna down to the police department for an interview.
Upon bringing her into the interview room, she was handcuffed, and I knew that she had not come up there willingly.
What's this about? Yes, if I'm not under arrest, then why do y'all have a reason to search me?
She was really uncooperative. She did not want to speak to us.
Okay, what is this about? Please get this over with and tell me what it's about.
Okay, so...
Somebody who I've been hanging with.
Yeah.
Okay, who?
Marty Lucas.
That people. And that's straight up.
She definitely has a problem with Marty that was very suspicious, and it really struck a nerve in us because we wanted to know what this problem is.
2 days after finding the body of 63-year-old Marty Lucas, police are interviewing his former girlfriend, Donna Hargrave, a woman with a long criminal history and a grudge against Marty.
She had been arrested many times here in Ardmore. She had been known to be at least uncooperative with police, if not somewhat violent and unruly.
She didn't really care too much for Marty. We thought maybe she had something to do with his death.
He pissed me off because he was just being a dickhead.
So when you said F him, what are you mad at him about?
He just promised things and don't ever fall through. Like I talked to Marty about moving my trailer over to him. Over to his house or something. He said no.
He knew that she had not been clean and that she had not been trying to straighten up, and that he wasn't going to help her as long as she wasn't trying to help herself.
Could Marty's rejection have led Donna to do something unthinkable?
So if I were to tell you something bad happened to Marty, what would you say?
What do you mean? What's wrong with him?
Well, if I were to tell you he was dead, someone did something to him, what would you say about that?
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Where is he?
Yeah, that's why you're here.
This was a girl that was very hardened, and for her to break down and to cry and was very genuinely upset over Marty's death.
She did say that they had recently broken up and that she hadn't seen him anytime in the last 4, 5, 7 days.
Can you kind of start like maybe Wednesday morning, tell me where you were, what you did, where you went?
At my mom's and I slept all day.
Okay.
We were able to pretty quickly corroborate where she had been.
It was unlikely that she had anything to do with his death. However, we did not rule her out immediately.
Days after Marty's gruesome death, his family and friends come together to say their goodbyes.
Marty's funeral was amazing. It was very, very sad, though, because everyone who knew him knew that he didn't deserve anything ever bad to happen to him. Everyone loved Marty. Everyone.
There was quite a bit of his workers, even his past workers, that come to his funeral. It was a good day, but a bad day at the same time.
Meanwhile, police doggedly follow each and every lead.
We did have a large suspect pool because we didn't know who all might have been working for Marty. One of the things that we wanted to get identified was who Junior was that was working on the truck. So myself and another investigator said, we'll run by the halfway houses and see if we can get Junior identified. So we went over to the Broadway house, and the director there gave us the name of Clarence Bibb Jr. He said he thought Junior was from up by Oklahoma City, and he's got a pretty extensive record, including some assault. Well, we really believe that if Junior and Marty had gotten into an altercation over the payment of the truck motor, maybe he took the money, it got out of hand, he killed Marty, took Marty's money and the truck, and took it back to Oklahoma City to chop it up.
We found that law enforcement there knew Clarence very well. They knew his family very well. And they lived in several homes that would be described as a compound, like a family compound.
And they said, don't go out there without a lot of us. Clarence is violent, and so you don't go up there by yourself.
Detectives assemble a task force with local and state police and make the 2-hour drive to Junior's compound.
When I first got out there, I thought, man, this is a real possibility. Man, we might find our truck out here. So we went up and knocked on the door. And when Clarence showed up, I thought, good Lord, this is one large man. And if he gets violent, I don't know what I'm gonna do. You look at him and you see what had happened to Marty, you're thinking that if anybody could do it, this guy could do it. He's big.
Detectives ask if he and Marty had fallen out over the work Junior had done on Marty's truck.
And he was happy with what Marty had paid him, and there was no disagreement.
He said that Marty paid him $500 more than he was supposed to because of the trouble that we went through.
And in fact, when I told him that Marty had died and that someone had caused his death, he too got emotional. Here, this big, mean, gruff country guy, and he's crying like a child over his friend's death.
He said, you know, I wouldn't hurt Marty if somebody paid me to. He said he considered Marty a mentor and a friend.
Clarence denied that he had been in Ardmore recently. He had gave an alibi that he had been at home with his mom and other family members around the time of Marty's death, and they corroborated his story that he was there. He fully cooperated with the investigation. He gave us his cell phone.
He let us have clothing and boots. He let us search his house. He let us search the property. And I mean, he let us just have free reign of whatever we wanted.
And we came up with nothing. I just remember thinking to myself, man, we are absolutely going nowhere with this investigation.
With nothing to link Junior to the homicide, detectives begin to fear the investigation is cooling down.
We had a pretty good idea that it wasn't Junior at that point. Donna Hargrave had a stone-clad alibi. Chris Dyer just didn't appear to be involved. I think both Bryce and I just were disheartened. We had no leads. We had no suspects, so we were just trying to figure out where do we go from here.
Then, an unexpected call turns the case red hot.
Well, we got back to the station, and dispatch yells down to us, hey, they found your truck. We were dead tired, but you went from dead tired to wide awake in a hurry.
4 days into the investigation of Marty Lucas's murder, detectives get the break they were looking for. Marty's missing truck.
And I remember the dispatcher telling me they found the truck. And I said, where is it? And they said in Springdale, Arkansas. And so this was the break that we needed.
We're pretty excited. We're just about to go nuts. We're like, okay, get a hold of Springdale police, get them on the phone. Let's find out what we got going on. It was a moment, I'll say that.
investigators asked Springdale police how Marty's truck had ended up over 300 miles away.
A citizen had called and told them that his friend had been in possession of the truck. And his friend, he identified as Jack Latham.
But who is Jack Latham? Detectives immediately ask Marty's family if they know the name. They learned Jack was one of Marty's most trusted laborers who hadn't been seen or heard from in months.
Jack Latham, he worked for my dad for a long time. He was a really hard worker.
Marty was extremely good to Jack. He gave him extra money here and there whenever he'd need it. Marty would bring him by my house sometimes, and they would occasionally ride around together. He seemed very quiet.
It was not unusual for people to come and go in Marty's business. Jack Latham worked for him on and off a couple of years prior to this.
When detectives dig into Jack's background, they learn he has a daughter and ex-wife in Ardmore and a checkered past.
He had an extensive criminal history for drugs and theft, but he's not the guy I would have picked to have committed this crime.
Jack Latham did minor misdemeanor type crimes, drug possession type crimes, but this is not a person that would even be on the radar because he had no really violent history.
So you're not going to think that this is a guy who could kill somebody, particularly not in the manner in which Marty was killed.
Investigators rush to Arkansas, where police have taken Jack into custody and seized the truck. But before speaking with Jack, they interview the man who first contacted police about the truck, Jack's friend, Raymond.
Raymond, he says to us that out of the blue, Jack calls on Friday night and says that he has got court on Monday, can he stay, or the weekend?
Raymond tells police Jack asked to get picked up at a local parking lot.
So he goes to pick him up, and he sees he's sitting in a, looks like a pretty nice Chevy pickup. And he says, hey, whose pickup is that? He said, oh, it's a guy that I'm visiting. He let me come sit in it to wait on you. And he says to us, I didn't believe him. Monday morning, Jack says, just take me to jail. I've got warrants. So he takes him to jail, and then he goes back home and he looks to see what the warrants are for, and it's for theft. And he thinks, I wonder if that truck's stolen, because something doesn't feel right with that truck. So he goes back to where the parking lot where the truck is and sees it doesn't have tags on it.
And so Raymond knew that Jack was lying. He knew he needed to call the police.
We went and looked at the truck, and the truck looked pristine on the inside. But when we sprayed it with Blue Star, there was blood everywhere.
We knew in the back of our minds that this was the key, that Jack Latham was the key to Marty Lucas's death.
And then the investigation took off at warp speed because, yeah, we think we've got our guy.
We went to the Benton County Jail and interviewed Jack that day.
First thing I noticed about him is he's slight of build. He's not very big. He seems to be very reserved and meek. He doesn't seem to be what I would picture to be a killer.
Then police noticed something else about Jack's appearance.
He looked pretty bad. He had some injuries to his face. He had this greenish brown black eye or injury to his eye. He had a minor abrasion to his lip.
Could Jack have suffered his injuries while attacking his former boss, Marty? Police start by asking Jack when he was in Ardmore last.
Okay. I guess at some point in time you've been in Ardmore, been around Ardmore, or lived in Ardmore or something?
Yeah, a long time ago, about 6 years ago.
Jack tells detectives he's recently been living 200 miles away in Enid, Oklahoma.
Who were you staying with? My brother and him.
Then, investigators cut to the chase.
We've been working on an investigation for the last almost a week now. Your name's come up, and before I can really get into a lot of questions with you and details and explain to you, why we're here and all that, I got to read you your Miranda rights.
After we Mirandized him, he said he didn't want to talk to us anymore.
Do you wish to make a statement, or will you answer any questions that we have for you today? No. No? Okay.
With Jack refusing to talk, police need to find a way to place him near Marty's house at the time of the murder.
So, in his initial interview, he tells us that he hasn't been to Ardmore, that he came down here from his brother's house in Enid. I called Enid PD, and they went out, they talked with the brother, they talked with the brother's wife. They said, yes, he has been here at our house.
But then detectives get a stunning piece of information Jack hadn't shared.
His brother's wife said I'd put him on the bus to go see his wife and daughter in Ardmore on the Monday morning before Marty had been killed. So we knew he had gotten to Ardmore. We The next day, we got a hold of the bus and found out that, yes, indeed, he had been at Ardmore.
With Jack still in custody, police drive back to Ardmore.
The detectives got a search warrant and looked through Jack's phone, and that led them to his ex-wife and daughter.
Did you see your dad in the truck last week?
No.
Okay. Do you understand what kind of trouble your dad's possibly in? He's been detained as a suspect in a homicide. So you for sure haven't seen your dad since he's been in Ardmore?
Investigators talk to Jack's ex-wife, Teresa, next.
Has he came to visit you lately? No?
But I haven't seen from him or heard from him.
So would it surprise you to know that Jack is involved in a homicide here in Ardmore?
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like him.
Both of them said they haven't seen Jack. He hadn't been in Ardmore. They don't know what we're talking about.
And we knew this was not true because on Jack's phone, we knew that he had called Teresa and Shelby.
And during that interview with Teresa, I laid it out for her. I just flat out told her I knew she was lying.
I'm not saying anything. I've told you guys everything I know.
No, you haven't.
Yes, sir, I have.
No, you haven't. And we can prove it. It's a matter of time before we put you in that truck. We put you in that truck, it starts getting serious in a real quick hurry.
Police start to question if Jack's ex-wife and daughter are involved in Marty's murder.
At that point, she decided that she didn't want to talk to us anymore, and she and Shelby left. And I just told her, we're not going to stop. We're going to solve this crime with or without you. The only question is, what's your role going to be?
Less than 24 hours later, police get a call.
The next day, early morning, the next morning, Teresa called, said, I want to come back and talk. So from that, I mean, that kind of broke open a whole new layer of the case.
Police investigating the murder of Marty Lucas are trying to place his friend and employee, Jack Latham, at the scene of the crime.
We knew that he was coming here to visit his wife and daughter.
They both told investigators that they did not know where Jack was. They had not seen Jack. He had not been in Ardmore.
But Jack's daughter and ex-wife returned to the police station the next day.
Yesterday, you were pretty firm that you didn't know nothing.
I was really scared and I thought about it all night and I felt really bad. Really hit home, so I had to tell the truth. I did see Jack on the 11th and 12th.
Which was what, Monday and Tuesday?
Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
And he dropped us off at my mom's house on the 13th in the morning.
Teresa says Jack stayed at an Ardmore motel on Monday and Tuesday nights.
They said Jack had called Marty to see if he had any work for him. And Marty said, no, I can't use you. I don't need you right now.
And do you know what day that was?
Tuesday night.
They both said that about 8 or 8:30 on that Wednesday morning, Jack left, sent an officer to Motel 6 to see if they had video. And sure enough, we've got video of Jack Latham leaving Motel 6, wearing the same clothes as the person that's walking. The Bolero camera picks up.
About an hour later, a green Chevrolet truck that we believe was Marty's truck shows up in the parking lot in Motel 6.
You watch him go over to a dumpster, throw something in the dumpster, which we believe was the rock and the iron. Where did he go get the truck?
He said his friend gave it to him.
Then, Jack did something even more suspicious.
When he came in, he went straight to the sink and washed his hands. He did wipe his face down, and he put his hoodie on, and he told me that he did something bad, but he wouldn't tell me what.
He said, we gotta leave, we gotta get out of here. He drops them off, and they don't see him again.
And so by then, yeah, we got enough to file charges on Jack Latham.
I called the family members and told them what we knew.
I was very shocked because Jack had been in my house around my children. He just acted very shy, but he didn't act like he would hurt anyone.
It was shocking to me because he treated Jack with respect like he did everyone else.
Police charge Jack Latham with first-degree murder and extradite him from Arkansas. When he arrives in Ardmore, Jack starts talking.
Jack told me that he was in desperate need of money. He had no job. He needed money for drugs. And he knew that Marty Lucas was the source of that money. Marty had told him no, that he knew that he wasn't clean. His story was that a physical altercation occurred, that he took a rock paperweight from the kitchen table, struck Marty with it, that in his words, he freaked out, took the keys to the truck and a few $100s from the wallet and left the area.
Jack denies attacking Marty with a stone from outside or the iron.
There were some aspects where he seemed to truly be confused about what had happened because he was strung out on drugs, including, was there an iron used?
So what had really happened? Police have their own theory as to how the murder played out.
We believe that this was premeditated.
I think he went to Marty's house, and I think he picked that rock up on the outside of the house and he knocked on the door, because I don't think he was going to take no for an answer. And when Marty told him no, a fight ensued in which he struck Marty with the rock. I think Marty fought back. He struck him with the iron, which was readily available, and then burned him with it, whether on purpose or on accident. He took the iron and he took the rock with him, and he disposed of the evidence, and he drove to Arkansas.
It was absolutely senseless over a few $100s.
Despite the evidence, prosecutors worry defense lawyers will try to argue Jack was desperate and never planned to kill Marty.
I thought that this case met the elements from a legal standpoint of first-degree murder, but then you have to be mindful of the fact that a jury would think also Jack's explanation is somewhat believable. He's a hopeless junkie. He's desperate for money.
With the family's consent, prosecutors charged Jack with second-degree murder.
We didn't want to risk going to trial and then letting him free.
In October 2020, Jack Latham pleads guilty and is sentenced to 25 years in prison.
I feel like we got justice. I know he's going to be locked up and my family's going to be safe.
Jack was very unexpected as a killer because he just didn't act like he was that type of person.
Jack Latham, he's still a mystery to me, you know, because just by being around him, I never thought he would do something like that.
He did this for nothing. There was no reason for nothing.
Marty was such a nice guy. But not only that, I mean, think of all the people whose lives he affected in a positive way. That's a sense of loss for our community.
When I lost Marty,
in Arizona, a shipment of money vanished into the high desert, along with the 2 men hired to guard it. The FBI didn't know if the guards were participants or victims of an ambush. Answers lay somewhere in Arizona's vast Northwest Territory. FBI agents struggled to piece together scattered clues to reveal the truth.
In Arizona, an armored van loaded with cash failed to reach its destination. Authorities suspected an inside job. When the vehicle was recovered, with the drivers and the cash missing, those suspicions grew even more. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. This well-planned crime required extraordinary efforts to solve. The FBI knew that the smallest detail could make or break the case.
May 24th, 1977, Phoenix, Arizona. A security company transferred $333,000 in cash and coins from their vault to an armored van. 2 courier guards prepared for another day distributing cash to Arizona banks.
Y'all about ready to go?
We've got a problem with this door. I think we want to take a look at it. Let me see.
One guard discovered a problem with the van's side door latch. They would report to the company maintenance garage before they set out. This delay put Cecil Newkirk and Russell Dempsey an hour behind schedule. The day's route included stops from Phoenix, 150 miles north to Flagstaff.
This is Van 26 to base.
With the delay, it would be difficult to make all the stops. Banks waited on the deliveries to provide cash to their customers.
Pure security.
By 10:30 a.m., the security company received a call from a bank complaining they had not received their delivery.
Mechanical problems with the van, so we got a little late start. Well, they should be there shortly. You know,
At first, the dispatcher thought the late start explained the problem.
Fine, we'll keep us informed. All right.
But throughout the afternoon, the dispatcher couldn't reach the guards.
Base Courier 1. Dempsey, you out there? This is Base. Come on in.
By 4:30, the company contacted the FBI. The Phoenix field office broadcast an APB for the armored van to all area police. State and local authorities used the remaining light of the evening to search for the missing van. They found no sign of it or the courier guards. Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth, now retired from the FBI's Phoenix field office, wondered if the guards had driven off with the money.
One of the first things that you do is certainly look at the drivers to see whether or not that might be a possibility as to what had happened, whether there's a driver involvement.
Both of the missing guards were married. That evening, an FBI agent interviewed each of their wives separately. They confirmed that neither of their husbands had financial problems that would provoke them to steal the money. Company officials agreed. Both guards had given 20 years of faithful service. The missing van's route covered a vast area of the state. Authorities had nearly 1,000 square miles to search, and most of that terrain was remote desert. The next day, Arizona Department of Public Safety helicopters retraced the guards' scheduled route. They flew up Interstate 17, north toward Flagstaff, checking all exits. Pilots spotted the van 50 miles north of Phoenix. It had been abandoned a quarter-mile off the interstate, in a remote area near the town of Bumblebee. Arizona public safety officers and local deputies cordoned off the area before the FBI arrived. Agents approached the van cautiously. They did not want to disturb the footprints tracked around the vehicle. The armored van's doors were locked. From the outside, there was little to indicate what had occurred.
There didn't appear to be a struggle on the inside, but we had to actually get inside the vehicle before we could really conduct a thorough investigation or examination of the van. And it wasn't until later on that morning that they had brought a spare set of keys out and we effected entry into the van.
The radio was still on. Yet the base had not received any calls for help. The van's siren had not been tripped. A shotgun kept in the van for defense had not been fired, and its safety was still engaged. The guards had not used any of their resources to signal that there had been a robbery. In the back, agents found bags containing several $1,000s in coins, but $293,000 in paper currency was missing. Blood spatter on the carpet and money bags indicated someone had been injured, but agents didn't know who.
Your biggest fear at the time, of course, is for the safety of the guards. Money can always be replaced. Your life cannot. And so we were certainly concerned about the guards' fate.
Amongst the footprints in the dust, investigators noted a separate set of tire tracks behind the van. Evidence technicians captured the tire prints with photos and plaster casts. Agents concluded that it was unlikely the guards had been overpowered by a single perpetrator.
The location of the van, the condition of the van, and everything that we found at the scene just told us that this was a crime that had been well planned and probably had been committed by more than one person.
Bear. Deputy Dale Lent from nearby Mojave County was brought in to assist the investigation. A narcotics officer trained in ground print identification, Lent could reconstruct crimes from foot and vehicle prints. He was one of only 2 trackers qualified to testify in Arizona court.
The first concern was to check the area to see if the guards had been taken somewhere away from the van and something had happened to them. So the first thing I did was do a 360 around the scene, which included checking the road further up.
The guards were nowhere to be found. But on a hill near where the van was abandoned, Lent discovered more tire tracks and footprints. From this position, there was an unobstructed view of the interstate that the guards traveled. Back near the van itself, the deputy found 2 separate sets of large footprints. Based on his observations, Lent concluded that at least one other vehicle and 2 perpetrators had been involved.
The vehicle had come down, backed up near the van, picked up something up, whether it be the 2 guards or whether it be the money. Hard to tell, but I'd say it was the money because it was a trail. It wasn't just one. It was a well beat out path.
Examining the strata of tread prints, Lent deduced that one vehicle had followed the van from the interstate to where it was abandoned. Deeper tracks leading back into the interstate showed that the vehicle had left much heavier than when it came. Investigators believed that, dead or alive, the guards had been taken by the assailants. The FBI turned to the media for help.
We did what we could to keep this on the front page of the news, and we did what we could to make sure that people were aware that we were looking for these guards.
The media reports generated calls from witnesses. Several motorists claimed to have seen the van stopped on the northbound side of Interstate 17 on the morning of May 24th. One saw an Arizona Department of Public Safety officer walking towards the van. Other witnesses had similar stories, but details differed. The make and color of the officer's car varied. In some accounts, he was parked in front of the van. Other times, he was stopped behind. Agents contacted the Arizona Department of Public Safety. No officers had reported stopping an armored van on I-17 that morning.
Well, at that point, I was fairly convinced that something amiss had probably happened to the guards, that somehow, someplace, they had been stopped, and they had let their guard down, and that they'd been taken captive. And being that we didn't find the guards in the immediate vicinity, it soon became evident that the guards probably were taken against their will.
The FBI and Deputy Lent searched Interstate 17 for the spot witnesses had described. The tracker found the place where he believed the van had been stopped.
The marks were fresh within the time frame, 24 to 48 hours. You could see where the door was, where somebody got out, where there were scuff marks there on the ground. It looked like, where there had been movement.
Digs and gouges in the dirt indicated that there had been a struggle near the rear of the van. A second vehicle's tire tracks at the interstate matched those in the remote area where the van had been abandoned. Curiously, the same tracks were found further up the road, just in front of where the van had been pulled over. Several motorists even underwent hypnosis to provide details to a sketch artist of what they remembered. Some recalled that the officer at the scene wore a hat. Others claimed the officer had no hat. But none of the sketches produced any leads. The FBI had reached a dead end. Then, on the morning of June 16, 1977, 300 miles northwest of where the van had been abandoned, two men made a gruesome discovery while fishing at Lake Mead. The men discovered a body floating in Debbie's Cove. They contacted the National Park Service. Investigators sped to the cove where the body had been spotted. Local law enforcement joined the National Park Service divers. They pulled close to the corpse. The body was fully clothed. Its head and torso were covered with a canvas bag. An officer retrieved a wallet from the back pocket. The victim was Russell Dempsey, one of the missing armored car guards. The divers searched the area but couldn't find the second guard's body. Not far below the surface, they discovered two sticks of wood connected by a rope.
What do you got? Okay, bring it on over to the boat here.
To investigators, it appeared to be a garrote used to strangle someone. The robbery was now a murder investigation. Investigators still had nothing that could lead them to any suspects. They only knew that an Arizona public safety officer, or someone masquerading as one, might be involved. On the morning of June 16, 1977, National Park Service divers in Arizona retrieved a dead body from Lake Mead. It was one of two armored car guards that had disappeared on May 24th, along with $293,000. The whereabouts of the second guard and the money remained unknown. The county medical examiner determined that the guard found in the lake had suffered a heart attack. He had also been strangled. Investigators believed that a garrote recovered near the body had been used to choke him. A strand of the victim's hair found tangled in the device supported their suspicions. FBI agents traveled to Lake Mead to question people who were familiar with the resort area. Whoever had dumped the body had likely used a boat to get to the deeper water. More than 20 agents canvassed rental shops around the 247-square-mile lake. No one reported any suspicious activity, but agents collected rental receipts in the hopes they'd eventually have a suspect's name to reference. Special Agent Laird Heastand, now retired from the FBI's Kingman Resident Agency, joined the case. He would search for names on receipts any place a traveler might have visited in the area.
We didn't have any good leads on who had committed this crime. And our assistant agent in charge in the Phoenix office decided to have FBI agents check every service station from the area where the armored car was located all the way up to Lake Mead, where the body had been transported.
That was a distance of more than 300 miles. Considering all the different routes to the lake, the agents had hundreds of service stations to check. The agent started his inquiries at the station owned by an acquaintance named Stan.
I asked Stan if he had heard anything about the robbery, and he said to me, "I've been waiting for somebody to come to talk to me." And then he related to me that the day after the robbery that he had to take his tow truck up to Lake Mead and pull a truck out of the lake that had backed out into the lake.
On May 25th, Stan had received a call from two men whose truck was stuck at Benelli Landing on the lake. The men explained they had gotten drunk while fishing and backed their truck too close to the water. The owner didn't see any fishing equipment in the pickup, but he did notice drag marks in the dust of the flatbed. It appeared that something heavy had been hauled out of the back.
All right.
Stan brought the two men to his service station. He wrote a receipt and asked for a signature. The customers hesitated before one agreed to sign. The name he used was Mike Poland. The station owner believed he'd be able to identify the men if he saw them again. It was the break investigators had been hoping for. The ease by which he found it surprised Special Agent Heastand.
The first place I walk into, I developed this information. It totally caught me off guard and shocked me. And I said, "Oh boy, this is it. We finally have something that we can start from."
Agents searched for the name Michael Poland amongst the thousands of boat rental receipts collected from Lake Mead. After several hours, they found it. Michael Poland had rented a boat the day after the robbery, naming Benelli Landing as his destination. It was the same spot from where his truck had been towed. Agents returned to Lake Mead, searching for additional evidence between Benelli Landing and the boat rental shop on the opposite shore. Within the breadth of that 4.5-mile span, officers spotted another bag-covered corpse floating on the surface. It was the second missing courier guard. He had been severely beaten before he was drowned. The medical examiner found 2 welts on his chest, consistent with wounds inflicted by a high-voltage taser gun. The guard's personal effects were removed, including a self-winding watch that had stopped at 10:37 p.m. on May 26th. Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth's team redoubled their search for clues at Lake Mead.
Based upon where their bodies were found and the currents and the length of time that we felt that they had been in the water itself, we were able to track back where we thought they may have been put in at Lake Mead.
That area was just 100 yards from Debbie's Cove, where the body of the first guard had surfaced. Divers focused on a ledge 12 feet down that bordered an 800-foot trench. A sweep of the ledge yielded a third canvas bag, similar to the ones that covered the bodies. The bag was sent to the FBI lab for processing. Inside the bag, agents recovered an Arizona license plate that resembled those used on Arizona public safety cruisers. 2 revolvers were also found, but no prints could be lifted from the corroded weapons. Rocks that matched those from Benelli Landing had held the bag at the bottom. Examiners also found concrete dust caked in the weave of the canvas bag. Agents called on Stan, hoping the service station owner could identify a driver's license photo of Michael Poland, one of the two men that had hired him to tow their pickup from Benelli Landing. Among 6 photos, Stan recognized the face of Michael Poland.
This man here?
The FBI had finally confirmed a primary suspect. They hoped Michael Poland would lead them to another. In June of 1977, the FBI pursued whoever killed 2 armored car guards and made off with $293,000. Tire tracks and footprints at the crime scene suggested that at least 2 perpetrators were involved. Agents believed one of them was Michael Poland. They hoped surveillance of Poland would lead to another. Though he did not appear to have a job, Poland was spending a lot of money. Agents saw a new motorcycle on the property. The FBI identified a man who visited frequently as Michael's younger brother, Patrick. Patrick Poland had just bought a new car. When the brothers were inside, an agent approached Michael's teenage son and complimented the new motorcycle. The boy responded that his father had recently bought 2 of them and a lot more. Agents expanded their investigation to include Patrick Poland and subpoenaed the financial records of both brothers. Prior to the armored van robbery, each had severe money problems. Shortly after, their debts had been paid and both had purchased new vehicles. Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth compared their income to their recent spending habits.
We tried to document as much as we could as to how much money they were spending and to what kind of means of support that they had. And the two just didn't seem to mesh very well. And when that happens, and then you know that folks have got access to a fairly large amount of money with no real means of support, that's a pretty good clue to us.
Agents interviewed the brother's father and photographed his pickup truck. Mr. Poland admitted that his sons had borrowed the truck on the day of the robbery. The father had mixed concrete in the flatbed several weeks before the robbery. Agents took a sample of the dust for processing. FBI examiners analyzed the concrete sample. They compared it to the cement dust on the canvas bags recovered from Lake Mead. Examiners concluded that the dust on the bag had come from the same batch of concrete taken from the truck. Once again, the FBI asked Stan to look at a photo lineup. The station owner could not identify Patrick Poland as the man with Michael.
This isn't the truck. It looks exactly like when I lowered it right down.
But he did recognize their father's truck as the one he towed from the lake.
That's it. That's it.
Positively.
In the early morning of July 27, 1977, agents arrived at Michael Poland's house with a search warrant. Poland claimed to be a self-employed jewelry salesman. He said that on the day of the heist, he was in Las Vegas buying gems.
There 3 days. What did you do on the way back?
Investigators found $12,000 in cash. He claimed it was used for their jewelry business. The agents confiscated numerous receipts. One of them was for a pair of high-voltage taser guns sold to a man named Mark Harris a month before the robbery. A short distance away, agents searched the house of Michael's brother, Patrick Poland. FBI Special Agent Frank Mowry, now retired, asked if he and his brother Michael had been at Lake Mead. Patrick gave a different story than his brother had.
He initially said that he and his brother were there fishing. He was very nervous. He was extremely nervous. He had difficulty in explaining a lot of about his whereabouts, particularly on the day of the crime and the day after the crime.
While Patrick was being interviewed, he received a call. It was his brother Michael.
Yeah, they're over here too.
He urged Patrick not to talk to investigators. The search at Patrick's house yielded a stash of weapons and $16,000 in cash. The FBI tracked down and processed the cars the brothers owned before the robbery.
Different.
The tire treads did not match the tracks found at the crime scene. Examiners found no physical evidence that tied the cars to the crime. Agents visited the gun store where the tasers had been sold to Mark Harris prior to the robbery. The clerk who had made the sale could only remember that Harris was a white male in his 20s. Since the receipt was found in Michael Poland's home, they theorized it was probably his alias.
One of the things the FBI does is try to eliminate all other good logical suspects, and we did this in that case. The name Mark Harris, a rather common name, we had to eliminate that name as being anybody other than the alias of Mike Poland.
Special Agent Mowry searched public records for a Mark Harris between the ages of 25 and 40.
We actually identified literally hundreds of Mark Harrises, from vehicle records, motor vehicle records, phone books, and every way we could, and went out to their houses physically, tracked them down and interviewed them, and found that they did not have anything to do with this crime.
With no proof that Mark Harris was an alias for Michael Poland, and no physical evidence tying the brothers to the crimes, agents couldn't arrest the brothers. For the next 10 months, all agents could do was keep careful track of their movements. Special Agent Chenoweth flew helicopter surveillance.
We wanted to know everything that Michael and Patrick Poland did, what they had done in the past, what they were going to do in the future.
Investigators continued to document the brothers' spending habits. They watched as the Polands closed a deal on a gaming arcade. Despite the circumstantial evidence, agents were unable to make an arrest. The FBI had to find stronger physical evidence to prevent the Poland brothers from getting away with murder. In April of 1978, the FBI suspected Michael and Patrick Poland of killing 2 courier guards and stealing nearly $300,000. After 11 months of investigation, agents did not have enough to convince a grand jury to indict. FBI Special Agent Frank Mowry desperately searched for evidence that would strengthen the case.
What we badly needed was physical evidence. We didn't have fingerprints. We didn't have any real good eyewitnesses. We didn't have any physical bits of evidence that could link Mike and Pat Poland to the crime.
The agent focused on the 3 canvas bags retrieved from Lake Mead with the guards' bodies. He checked with over 20 sources in the Phoenix area where the bags might have been manufactured. None recognized the work.
Nobody could even give me a hint of who in town would make such a bag. Some even said, well, they probably came from out of town. So I became very discouraged.
The agent visited the last store on his list and showed the bag. The owner recognized it as coming from his company. It was a custom size with a unique stitch sewn only by their seamstresses. He also identified the specially ordered cord purchased from a Georgia company. As far as the owner knew, his was the only shop in the area that made anything like it.
He said, I will have in my record somewhere a receipt, because somebody would have walked in that door there and they would have said, I need to order so many bags, a certain length, a certain width, certain specifications.
At the Phoenix FBI office, agents poured over hundreds of receipts covering years of business from the bag manufacturer. After almost a week, they found one receipt for 3 custom canvas bags dated 1 month before the robbery. They were sold to a man named Mark Harris. Agents had seen the name before on a receipt for a pair of tasers. They had found the voucher months earlier during a search of Michael Pollan's house.
Hold on a second, Frank.
The FBI was further convinced that Mark Harris was an alias from Michael Pollan. The canvas bag receipt connected the alias to the murdered guards, and cement dust in the pickup the brothers drove matched dust found in the bags. On May 17, 1978, after nearly a year of investigation, a federal grand jury returned an indictment for murder, kidnapping, and robbery against Michael and Patrick Pollan.
Gentlemen, these men should both be considered extremely armed.
The FBI suspected that the Pollans would not surrender quietly.
They've both already killed 2 men that we know of. You got your route plan. You're going to be picking up Patrick. We're going to be picking up Mike. Check your weapons. Check your vest.
Special Agent Stephen Chenoweth believed an armed confrontation was possible.
It had to be very well and meticulously planned. The Pollans were very violent. They had shown their violence. They had a strong propensity to, commit violence, as evidenced by the guards' fate. And one of the things that we absolutely knew we could not do was to arrest them while they were in the house. And we absolutely had to take them away from the homes.
Agents feared the suspects would barricade themselves in their houses and shoot it out if they discovered they were going to be arrested.
This guy, yeah.
Agents waited for Patrick Pollan to emerge. When he finally did, they noticed he was carrying a case for a handgun. They tailed him for a safe place to make the arrest. The second arrest team waited for Michael Pollan to come out of a real estate office. Once outside, there would be less risk to bystanders if shooting erupted. The first arrest team caught up with Patrick outside the game arcade. The agents intercepted him before he entered the building.
We identified ourselves. Of course, he knew me already from previous contacts, and I told him the time had come and we had warrants for their arrest, and he gave up without any problem. He was armed. He had a .44 Magnum weapon on him and another couple of weapons in his car, but he made no effort to use them.
Agents radioed the other team that Patrick had been picked up. Michael Pollan had been in the real estate office for almost 45 minutes. Agents feared that he had somehow gotten word of Patrick's arrest and was preparing for an armed confrontation. They decided to risk entering the building.
Federal agents, please step back. Mike Pollan, you're under arrest.
The suspected murderer surrendered without incident.
Cannot afford an attorney, they can provide one for you. You understand what I'm saying?
Michael Pollan refused to answer questions. He insisted his brother do the same.
Have a hat off.
no fingerprints tied either brother to the murdered guards or the abducted van. Michael remained confident that the FBI case was weak.
In a case like this, you've got a joint venue. Venue certainly lies with the federal government with respect to the actual robbery of the van, and but we also have a homicide case that rests with the state authorities.
Authorities considered their best strategy for a successful prosecution. State and federal prosecutors decided to split the charges. The Polans went on trial for robbery and kidnapping in federal court. Based on the circumstantial evidence gathered, a federal jury found the brothers guilty of the charges on February 15, 1979. They were sentenced to 100 years.
These were two guards that were very hardworking, very loyal to their company. Both of them had worked for about 20 years for the company. They were actually within weeks of retiring. They were family men, they were good men, religious men, men that had devoted a lot of time and effort and loyalty to this company. And on the eve of their retirement, they were killed.
In November of 1979, an Arizona state jury returned a guilty verdict for murder. The judge gave the brothers the death penalty. The Polans appealed their conviction. The Arizona Supreme Court found that the testimony of a hypnotized witness and the taser gun evidence should not have been used. They also found that the jury had inappropriately discussed the federal trial. The Polan brothers' state murder convictions were overturned. Though agents were certain that the brothers had brutally murdered two men, state prosecutors would not seek a new trial. Because of parole laws at the time, Michael and Patrick Polan would be eligible for parole in less than 7 years. In 1982, an Arizona prosecutor declined to retry Michael and Patrick Polan for murder.
We chose not to because it was the exclusion of the eyewitness testimony.
He cited the cost, as well as the difficulty of proving the case with the evidence that had been excluded by the Arizona Supreme Court. United States Attorney Melvin McDonald was outraged that the Polan brothers might get away with murder.
I had followed it by way of the media and had never dreamed that I would play any role in the case until 1982, when it became clear that the ball was going to get dropped unless somebody stepped in. I called the county attorney and volunteered to take the case.
For the first time in history, a U.S. attorney was deputized as an Arizona state prosecutor. McDonald had to resurrect a case that many considered impossible to retry.
There had been 5 years transpired between the time of the crime and the time of the trial. Witnesses travel and move all over the country. Memories start to fade. And so you've got to recreate and present the crime as if it happened a month ago, when you're facing the problem that it's really 5 years old.
The prosecutor wanted to lock down the exact time that the victims had been deposited into Lake Mead and prove it was the same time the Polans were at the lake, so there would be no question the Polans were responsible.
One of the problems with the finding of the guards was that their bodies were not recovered for 6 weeks. The defense, we knew, would argue that they could have been dumped there by the real killers at any time.
Working with the FBI, the prosecutor found a piece of evidence that had been overlooked in the earlier trials. The second guard's self-winding watch. Examiners noted that the watch stopped at 10:37 p.m. on May 26th. That particular self-winding watch would stop working if it weren't moved for 12 hours. That meant that the guard's watch stopped 12 hours after his arm came to rest at the bottom of Lake Mead.
We actually had watch experts take the watch apart to prove that the watch had not stopped because of water damage. There was no water that had gotten into the portions of the watch that controlled its operation. We literally went all the way to Switzerland to get experts there to talk about how much time it would take for a watch that hadn't been cleaned in 5 years to finally unwind.
Forensics experts used this information to determine exactly when the bodies had been dumped into the water. Their estimation exactly matched the time the FBI had established that the Polans were at the lake, getting their pickup towed from Benelli Landing. The prosecutor explained that the brothers had been there to dump the bodies.
For the drama point, I told the jury that while Mr. Newkirk is dead, he is speaking to you from the grave. He's asking you, look at my watch. I'm sending you a message through my watch.
After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury was convinced.
Will the defendants rise?
On November 18th, 1982, they found Michael and Patrick Poland guilty of murder. The judge reinstated a sentence of death.
All rise.
Once again, the defendants appealed the conviction.
It was one of the rare instances where their case went to the United States Supreme Court. And the United States, in a published opinion, a very closely divided court, again affirmed their conviction and sentences.
How the situation...
With nothing left to lose, Patrick Poland agreed to tell investigators and the families of the victims exactly what happened. In 1987, he gave his confession to FBI Special Agent Frank Mowry.
They had actually spent almost a year tailing the van. They knew its route. On those mornings that it went up to Prescott and delivered its money to the banks in Prescott, they knew the exact route. They knew the stops that it made. They knew the times that it did it. They knew everything about it.
The Polands used neither of their own cars in the robbery. They had rented one with cash that the FBI was unable to trace.
We never found it. It was a rental car. And by the time the rental car was taken back, by the time they figured out what was going on, it had been rented out probably 200 times since then. And we were never able to actually pin down for certainty the car that may have been used in the case.
The brothers affixed a light bar and a license plate that resembled those used by the Arizona Department of Public Safety.
Batteries waiting for that CV?
I believe so.
They readied their tools needed for the heist.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we got a spare set.
Good. You got enough ammunition?
Yeah.
The Polands waited more than an hour. The van was unexpectedly delayed. Finally, they saw their quarry. Patrick drove the disguised car while Michael hid under the dash. They stopped the van on the pretext of speeding. Company policy insisted that the guards never open the van doors to anyone, even if stopped by the police. Patrick ordered the driver to step out. When he failed to follow procedure, the driver and his partner were defenseless. The Polands put the guards in the rear of the van. Michael was to drive the van while Patrick drove the car. But when Patrick took off, the van didn't follow. This explained the tracks found in front of where the van was stopped. By the time Patrick reached the rear of the van, Michael was beating the guards. They stunned the guards with high-voltage tasers. The brothers drove the vehicles into the desert near the town of Bumblebee.
Pat.
One of the guards looked as if he had died from the beating. Michael decided that the other would have to die as well. He had a makeshift garrote in his pocket, a cord tied to 2 pieces of wood.
And the one thing we found out about it, of course, is that Mike was obviously the planner, the instigator, and the enforcer, and everything related to the crime, and that he was the one who physically murdered the 2 guards. Pat, of course, helped him at Mike's insistence, but it was Mike who put the rope around their neck and choked them.
Went around the back.
Patrick claimed that Michael had buried most of the money in the desert.
Just had to stop.
At least one of the Poland's relatives knew where that was. Because she cooperated, the authorities didn't prosecute her for her involvement. The money had rotted from the elements in the intervening years. Patrick's confession gave closure to the case.
We knew most of it. We felt better, of course, when the person actually admits it, because there's always some room for doubt until you get it from the heart and from the mouth of the perpetrator.
The courts turned down all appeals for the Polands. The state of Arizona finally administered a lethal injection to Michael Poland on June 16, 1999. After all calls for clemency were denied, Patrick Poland was executed 9 months later on March 15, 2000. Unlike his older brother, Patrick used his final moments to express regret for the pain and suffering he had caused.